Today we're taking a look at ECOFLOW's new 125 watt bifacial solar panel. This is going to come in three configurations: 125 watts, 250 watts, and also a 500 watt package. This new solar panel is going to come with a 5-year warranty and also a 30-year lifespan until it reaches 90% output. This new solar panel is also using third cut cells with 16 bus bars in between each one of the cells. So instead of one large cell, you actually have 3 cuts in between and all the bus bars going through this. And this is a new N-type technology, which means this is going to be much more efficient than other types of cells of before. The glass on here is 1.1 millimeters thick and it's tempered glass. It'll also come with corner protectors, a black aluminum alloy frame, and even an angle indicator. That way you know that you're getting peak amount of sunlight into your solar panel, which when we test these later, you'll be able to see how that works. Being that this is a bifacial solar panel, it has the ability to put out 138 watts total through the back and also the front of the solar panel combined. Now, instead of using traditional MC4 connectors, they are now using XT60, but there is a difference between these. That you see the XT60 connection has both pins on one side. This means you only have to hook up the solar panel into your power station on one plug, while the other plug can actually stay disconnected, as this is actually a parallel setup. So you're going to be plugging in only one side only, and this panel is then going to be paralleled with others. So instead of a traditional series setup, each panel gets paralleled until you add a certain amount. Now you can add 4 of these together, up to 3 sets of 4, which can be combined up to over 1600 watts. So if you were to hook up 4 of these, they would all be in parallel, and then as you add an additional 4, it's actually going to be placing the other one into series. Now each one of these panels has a voltage that's an open circuit rating of 50 volts and only 3 amps. So when you put these in parallel, it will double your amperage, but your voltage is going to stay the same at around 50 volts. This makes it perfect for plugging in small power stations such as ECOFLOW's Delta 3 Plus, along with many others that they have. This will also come with an included kickstand that gives you a lot of flexibility as far as how you want to mount this. It can actually go from 30 to 60 degrees, but looking here, it seems like you can actually adjust this quite a bit more than the 30 or 60 degrees, depending on how you set this up. Or of course, you could always just lay it flat on the ground. Now, if you're like me, this is probably something you might be using either at home for backup power, or for me, it's going to be something I'm going to use in my RV. And as you can see, I have a really large storage bin here, which these are longer, but they're not as wide. So it does allow me to actually place this inside and be able to just put it up against this front wall, and I still have plenty of room left. Now, when you buy a 2-pack of solar panels, it'll come in its own carrying case that looks like this. Now, I suggest that when you take this out, each one of these is going to come in a bag. And after you remove this out of the bag, there will be a foam cover that is going to be on the back. This is something you may want to keep. That way, when you are transporting your solar panels, then it allows you to actually protect either the front or the back side. There is a separator that does come in the bag itself, but these are something that I think I'm going to be keeping just in case these get banged a little bit during transit. Okay, so all 4 panels are set up. This will be panel number 1, panel number 4. I've had these out here for at least 20 minutes, maybe a little bit longer now. That way they can get heat soaked. A hot panel is going to put out less watts. You see people putting these out and then they take a reading right away. Well, then you're going to see a major difference in your output from when you first put it out in the sun to maybe a half hour later. Now, just to get a rough idea, this isn't for accuracy. This is just to show you each one of these panels is running about 110 degrees roughly on the surface. But the outside temperature right now is only about 60 degrees. Okay, now to make sure that I'm getting at least 1,000 watts meter square, we're going to check our little meter here. And this is so we can follow STC guidelines. That way when you're testing solar panels, you're at least getting the minimum requirements. And as you can see right there, we are over 1,000 watts meter square. Now this is a bifacial panel. Now technically on the back side, it says you're supposed to have 138 watts of light coming on onto the back. But as you can see right here, there's only 72 watts meter square coming in no matter where I place this thing. 60 there if I get out closer to the edge. Now you will see other YouTubers who will put blankets down and mirrors and stuff. I'm not going to do that. That's not realistic. I don't know anybody who sets stuff up like this. They get a blanket down here, set up a bunch of mirrors, they get dusty, dirty. I don't do any of that stuff because it's just not realistic. I've never seen anybody do that in a professional installation either, so I'm not going to. I'm going to let it naturally bounce off whatever light's on the ground, just like it says in the manual that sand will put out a certain amount of reflective light. Same thing with concrete or other types of rocks and stuff, and that's what we're going to do as just a normal setup. I'm not going to do any clickbait thumbnails and weird stuff. We're just going to see what these do on their own. And just to show you, it is a pretty clear day today. There's a slight haze in the sky just because we have a lot of people that use fires to heat their houses in the hills. So slight haze, but overall really clear. Okay, so open circuit voltage on panel number 1, just to see what we got. Take a look down there, 47.8. So we'll see what our consistency is through the other panels. And here is panel number 2, 47.6. Panel number 3, 47.4. And panel number 4, 47.4. So overall, real consistent. We'll go ahead and start hooking these up. Okay, at the moment, just a single panel hooked up. And just this single one alone is giving us right about 111 watts out of 125. So actually not that bad. Now we're plugged into panel number 2. Same thing, real consistent, 112 watts. So far, so good. And panel number 3, still right around, well, this one's about 110. Okay, and that's solar panel number 4, and this one's putting out just a little bit more, a couple watts. Now, one thing I did notice is that probably because of the reflective light that we're getting on the concrete, the end ones are putting out, it seems to be consistently 2 or 3 watts more, versus this one here in the middle was only getting about 109, 110, 111, 112, 113, 114, depending. That was off camera. And same thing with this one on the end. So a little bit of reflective light giving us some extra. So only 10 watts off, maybe 12, 13 watts off of what your actual 125 would be, or your max of 138 if you were to get something reflecting on the back of this. Okay, so I said I wasn't really going to, but I had this 100 watt EcoFlow panel laying around, and maybe you can see this, but right now, there's the power station, if you can see the light reflecting off of it. Okay, so and then what we're going to do is we're going to come over to this panel because that's the one plugged in, and I don't know if you can see it, but look at the frame, the black frame. I'm moving the panel back and forth, and so now I'm just going to kind of concentrate the light. Let me come back here a little bit farther so I can get more reflection on it. And so right now it's basically pegged on that panel. We've gone up, oh, let me show you here. Hard to see, I'll zoom in. But right now we've gone up about 3 or 4 watts. I'm gonna take it away. So 117 down to 116, come back. And we're pretty much right on it, 117, 116, 118, and go away down to 115, 114. So realistically, just by adding like a little bit of reflection on one panel, you gain 3 watts, which is why I don't do that, because it's not worth my time. I'm going to use stuff like this out camping. I'm not going to be setting up some weird blankets or try to do some kind of false advertisement with this stuff. So I'd rather just kind of give you the realistic of when you set these up. Now right now I almost have these perfectly positioned inside of the circle, so you can see that we're getting max solar efficiency out of these. And right now with all 4 of these plugged in, check this out, doing pretty good. 465, 463 depending. That's not bad actually for a 500 watt setup. So if you bought a good quality 500 watt rigid panel, you'd be getting about 475 out of it, roughly, out of this setup. It's going to be a lot cheaper obviously, but it's not portable. This is for a totally different type of setup. This isn't meant to replace a rigid panel. This is meant to be a portable type of setup. So, but overall, not bad output. Now again, this is the Delta 3 Plus, so this is just a little over 1,000 watt hours. You can see the time it would take to charge this, basically about an hour and a half, 1.6 hours at this point. So if it stayed at 464 watts roughly, hour and a half, give or take, with this little setup. So, and again, you can expand this a lot. So it's kind of an interesting setup for sure, with EcoFlow doing this bifacial type of thing. Now again, I don't know how much extra you're really going to get on the bifacial. Sure, if you want to set up a mat and all that stuff, you can. The benefits of really buying it is for maybe if you were in the snow and you really have something to reflect the light a lot, or if you're actually going to mount bifacial panels how they should be mounted, which is at least 1 meter high, so that way you can get some more of that reflective light. Versus this being a portable setup, I just don't think you're going to get a whole bunch of reflection on these to create a whole bunch more wattage. This is how I would be using this on a normal, setup if I was to go camping or whatever. I'm not going to put the reflective stuff on the bottom or do mirrors or things like that. You can do whatever you want, but that's not what I would be doing. Okay, so one more test. I reset up everything, but I wanted to show you some shading. So we have one panel we're just going to do first, then two. So we just have the one plugged in, and if you take a look at our input, right now we're just doing about 82, 83 right now. Now our input is totally different because these are not optimized anymore. Like angle isn't optimal, but look what happens when I shade this panel. So again, 74, 75 watts. Now look at where my hand's gonna go. Just on one, we'll just do one cell like right here. This is kind of like, that one bigger cell that I kind of went over with you earlier. So just with my hand right there, we drop down to about half. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is put my hand right here. So instead of one we're gonna just call this one big cell in between these dots right here. So now instead of covering just one like this, we're gonna cover two. So I'm gonna cover these two right here, not going all the way across, but now check out our output. We're now basically down to 0, depending on where my hand is. If I go just a pinch more, cover up one more little cell, and there we go. We're pretty much at 0 right where this is. So now if I come up like this, and we'll just kind of do it lengthwise, that way we can kind of see how this is wired. We are now covering 1, 2, 3, and look at our difference. So now you can see that we're at about 40, 50 watts. But again, if we only do the 2 right here, then we pretty much go to 0. So once we get into another line of the cells as they go up and down, it pretty much just destroys this whole panel. So depending on how the shading is. Now, of course, if you shade this panel a little bit, it's not going to affect that one at all because these are in parallel again. So when they're in parallel, that means that this panel acts independently of this panel. Now, if they were in series, you would put your hand on here and it would affect that one greatly. But again, since they're in parallel, they act totally independent of each other. Okay, now I will admit these are definitely some nice panels, but they do come at a premium price. So that's something you're gonna have to determine if it's gonna be a good choice for you. Now I will be testing this, or at least comparing it to another popular portable solar panel soon. That way hopefully it gives you a little bit of an idea what might be a better way to go. Now when it comes to pricing, you can check down below because the prices do fluctuate all the time. Plus this is a holiday season, so the prices are drastically different right now from the normal pricing. I hope this video helped you out, and I hope to see you guys in another one.